Okay, so from those of you who were not here yesterday, we're discussing the issue of social networking sites. Yesterday we've seen a bit of information on the diffusion of these social networking sites, and we've seen the history of the emergence of this website. We've had a discussion about the specificity of different social networking sites, what are the aims of these particular tools in the Web 2.0, what could be the benefits both for consumers and, for businesses, and what are we going to do today? We discussed also some socioeconomic issues that are relevant. In the first place, the identity. So social networking sites can be understood as a means of enforcing an identity over a website, which might be real or fake, and we ended up discussing the issues related to privacy. Okay? Now, just to try to map different social networking sites, think of the idea of real identity versus fake identity, and think of the differences between sites that allow a strict selection of contacts and sites that are more towards the public exposition of content. Where would you put Facebook, for example? In which quadrant? Top left? Okay, do you think it has a wide public exposition as far as the single user identity is concerned? Maybe, I mean, it's always a way in which I can ask other people friendship and people can ask me friendship. It's not really public in the sense that as soon as I put something on Facebook, everyone sees it, okay? It's always a matter of selecting a group of people with whom I want to connect. Yes, Rafael? Okay, good point. But still, I can appear on Google as a name, but then if you want to get into my profile, yeah, so, I mean, this is an interesting point. If you think of Facebook, you have some sort of public exposition in the sense that people know that you're on Facebook, but still the way in which the social networking site is designed is a way in which I tend to provide my real identity and to bring up selected contacts instead of public exposition. Can you think of a website or of a social networking site that is in the top left quadrant? Who? But still, even with LinkedIn, not all the users can see your profile. Okay. Okay. Others? Who? Elisa, you were talking about a small word yesterday. Where would you put a small word? Almost by definition. Still real identity, probably. We're talking about people who want to have a profile on a social networking site, but, I mean, that's really a case of selected contacts. What about sites, social networking, or at least content sharing sites that tend to be characterized by fake identities? Twitter? YouTube is a case in which very often, we were discussing it yesterday, you do not really put your real identity. For sure, you have the public exposition. Okay? So according to different characteristics of the websites, identities, and contacts, you can decide where to position the specific social networking sites, which is very interesting also from a business management perspective. Remember always that the information about the identity and the way in which the network is actually public affects also the way in which companies can exploit the network. Okay? So for example, Flickr would be here, Facebook, LinkedIn, and a small word. I take your point, Barbara. This is not something that I've made up, of course. LinkedIn, it's a weird case. We will see, if we have time today, some specificities of LinkedIn, because in principle, the way in which it is designed allows just users that are 3 degrees away from you to see your entire profile and all the details about you. Okay, so you have the initial page available for all users, but then just a selected number of users can actually see the entire profile. This type of websites are characterized by a system of recommendation very often. This is the case of LinkedIn, and it is the case of a small word. So both sides actually are characterized by people who can somehow recommend you in a way, self-promotion, and in general are characterized by tools that allow the expansion, very quick expansion of the network. There are all sorts of matching sites that are somehow characterized by a strict selection of contact. The identity might be either real or not really real, depending on the restrictions of the management. Here we're talking about issues related to privacy and about relationship certificates that allow people to be in those sites. MySpace and YouTube in particular are probably the websites, the social networking sites or the content sharing sites where we observe more public exposition. Okay? And this is for the reason we were discussing yesterday about the fact that people actually want to advertise their content in a way. So, having in mind what we said yesterday about the characteristics of social networking sites that are by definition characterized by network effect, what are the managerial implications? Well, we're talking about network effects. Okay? We're talking about sites that exploit the size of the network in order to provide benefits to the users. So these particular sites are characterized by economies of scale, both on the supply side and on the demand side. Okay? Demand-side economies of scale arise directly from the existence of network effect, in the sense that my benefit increase as much as users get connected to my network. But there are economies of scale also on the supply side. So for the people who actually design social networking sites and who think about different tools who can enhance the existence of different users within the site. Okay? In the sense that the operating costs of running the website, of designing and running the website especially, are less than proportional to the number of users on the platform. Why do you think is this? What do you think lies behind the existence of economies of scale on the supply side, so for the people who manage a social networking system?
The more users you have, the more your database is bigger, so more advertising sites will come to you.
Okay, so there is an issue of advertising, of marketing. We were mentioning yesterday the viral marketing effect that you can exploit if you're sort of running or managing a social networking site. There is a fixed cost in building up, in setting up a website, okay? But then the variable cost of adding users is really decreasing as long as the number of users increase in the website. There is a sort of independence in the way in which users manage their personal page as long as they compile to specific settings that are set by the companies. So once you've decided the setting of a specific social networking site, then the way in which users manage their own page, for example, or users include different contents, do not really require strong costs on the supply side in order for the content to be managed or to be posted on a wall or to be posted on a page. Okay? And monitoring costs as well increase less than proportionally because, of course, if you have a network available, okay, I can monitor Paula's friends, for example, just by looking at her own profile. Okay, so even in terms of monitoring costs, in terms of information costs, there are economies of scales involved. And second, we were correctly mentioning the existence of viral marketing. So, for example, with network effect, the idea is that as a user, I can ensure the advertising, okay, spreading along my different connections. So if you advertise your product to my personal page, for example, all my friends, all my connections can see that specific product, and of course companies can take advantage of this. Okay? So even from an economics perspective, social networking sites are actually quite beneficial also on the company side. What are the implications of this? The implication of this is that whenever you have a structure for providing a service, and it will be true also for products, of course, but here we're talking about communication services, by which you have a very high fixed cost, but then the network allowed a cost decrease as long as more users join, you have a big managerial implication that states sponsor the access and then charge the use. So the idea is that you can provide the access for free by way of collecting money by sponsors or advertisers, and then ultimately you could charge the use. Okay? This is a principle that is valid for any kind of network management, even if we are talking about big telecom networks. Okay? And it is particularly true if we are talking about social networking sites. Okay? Yes?
I think that economics of scales are very interesting when we speak about social networking.
Yeah?
But actually, it's also interesting to look at the other side of the coin. I mean, diseconomies of scale, because I mean, Facebook could be a good example of that. When you know when the parents are also joining that network, then you get less interest of doing it as well. Also, when you have like new types of social networks, then you have this innovation, which they just want to have the newest, the cool stuff. And then when all these followers, like join the network, then these innovators, early adopters, then they are less attracted to this social network. So I think.
Okay. On the demand side, I take your point. That's correct. But on the supply side, the fact that I'm not using Facebook anymore because my parents, for example, have joined the network does not really affect the cost structure of the company. Okay? Because the idea is that you have a very big amount of users that is already connecting to the platform, and the cost of running and managing the platform has already decreased. I mean, the average cost in a way. Okay? On the demand side, that's true. So it's true that, as we also saw when we were discussing network effects at the local and global level, we might have actually these economies of scale on the demand side, because I might get bored or I might get sick of using a specific social networking site because everyone is doing that and they want to be the only one. Yes?
What is network charging we use talking about Facebook?
Yeah, okay. These are managerial implications that are valid whenever you have a structure like this. Okay? Saying that this is what actually companies are doing, okay? But the way in which you can really make money when you have a structure that is characterized by network effects and economies of scale on the supply side is find some way of sponsoring the access so that you don't have to charge users for that, and then once you have the users in place, since the network effect is there, you could in principle charge the use. Okay? This is, for example, what LinkedIn is doing, both for consumers and for businesses who want really to exploit the network. Okay? So basically, they are charging consumers and businesses, for example, in relation to the number of profiles they can see, to the specificities of their requests, and so on and so forth. Okay? Of course, Facebook lives out of advertising, out of sending around data about their own users to different market research companies, but and those companies are paying for that, by the way, so he's charging something to someone, okay, who are not the direct users, but are companies that can actually benefit from that. But whenever such a cost structure is in place, this is really like the golden rule from a managerial perspective, okay? It's also a rule that is very static in nature, if you want. So this is tell you what is the optimal pricing structure, okay, at time t, but of course, as the network evolves, you might change your pricing structure, you might discriminate prices according to the specificities of the users. And this is what lots of social networking sites do if they charge a price, okay? Second, yesterday we discussed a lot about the issue of privacy, about the issue of trusting actually the website. We said that one of the big failures of Friendster in the first place was that it created mistrust on the side of the users. This happened later on also with MySpace. So one of the most important things that these companies need to do is to lower the sensation, the feeling of mistrust of different users. And this is because social networks, as we were mentioning yesterday, are experience goods. So I cannot really evaluate its value before I get into the network. Okay? And even if this value of the service, which means my willingness to pay, can be somehow estimated before, it is really, really difficult to know if actually that characteristics are going to meet users' expectations. So the idea is that even if you have a structure on the supply side, on the cost side, that would tell you sponsor the access, charge a use, the problem with this is that users cannot really define their willingness to pay. Well, yesterday Bart was, he's not here today, but he was saying, well, if they asked me how much I would pay for getting into Facebook, I would say, how much, $10? What did he say? $10, yes. Yeah, but you know that because you're already connected into Facebook, so you can evaluate somehow the benefits of that social networking site. It's very difficult to do at the very beginning of the process. So what do you have to decide when you design social networking sites are mostly three main characteristics. The first one has to do with the degree of network decentralization. Okay, so you have to decide how much you want to actually centralize the process of interaction across users, the process of sharing content across users, and so on and so forth. And from a technical point of view, remember yesterday the Friendster and Rise.com versus the MySpace approach, you have to decide the degree of platform openness. Okay? So you have to understand if it's worth allowing users to self-develop applications, for example, or, like Facebook, if everything is decided in a centralized way. Second, you have to decide the type of interaction that are allowed on the social networking side, and, most importantly, the potential size of the network. Okay? This sounds probably surprising. Yesterday we had a discussion on this. Elisa was mentioning the a small world example. That's a social networking site that decided to have a size of the network which was not corresponding to the maximum possible size. Okay? And in the sense, going back to what Casper was saying, this has to do with the idea that as long as the network increases in its size, you might have these economies of scale, in a way. So there is a value of having a small network in the sense that that network, for example, is very specific to a community, or that network meets the requirement of a very few users that are, for example, innovators, or users that are interested in specific topics, or that know each other very well and do not want other users to join the network. Okay? So you can have different type of services on a specific network, or you can build up a network with the idea of having a unique type of service. Twitter somehow has decided for this particular strategy, and you might decide to have generalist social networking sites or very specialist social networking sites. Okay, beside the fact that we've seen also that there is a dynamics into that. And finally, although it's very difficult to monitor from an external point of view, you have to decide what kind of identity you want your users to have. You have to decide if you want to have a networking site that actually reflects the actual identity of the users, or if you just are interested in having a big size of the network irrespectively on the user's characteristics. Okay? Because of course if the identities are fake, it is very difficult to understand what is the behavior of specific users and to link that behavior with social demographic characteristics. for example. If I build up a profile which is fake, this means that I'm not really useful in terms of building up statistics for companies, in terms of data research, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, just to summarize what we said yesterday and the few things that we saw now, and then moving to the network structure, we've discussed the early years of the social networking side, in particular the Friendster and MySpace emergence. Remember that MySpace emerged precisely because Friendster users were not happy anymore about the specificities of the website. We've discussed a lot the idea that social networking sites had the aim of expanding niche communities, at least most of them, but still there are some sites that enforce a mechanism of selection of users. So not just because you have network effects, you might want to have a very big network. As far as the socioeconomic issues are concerned, impression management, friendship performance, and the identity and privacy issue are the most important topics. And in terms of managerial implication, what really matters when you have a social networking site in place is the exploitation of economies of scale, both on the supply side and on the demand side. And on the supply side, this had to do with the decentralization on the one hand and with the viral marketing process on the other hand. Okay? The managerial implication to this is to sponsor the access, charge the use, and then try to design a social networking site with a very clear idea in mind that is potentially innovative in itself. Okay? Now, having said that, let's look a little bit more into the network structure. Okay? So think about the social networking sites in which you're registered. Yesterday we saw lots of Facebook around, some MySpace, Orkut, and others. What do you think are the characteristics of the network? So think about the people you know, your friends' friends, and so on and so forth. How is the network characterized? If I had to build the network of Facebook, for example, you actually can do it through a sort of an application that allows you to build up your own network. How does it look like? Does it look very connected? Does it look very loose in a way? Are there many isolated people, or you think that everyone is connected to everyone else? What do you think? Guess, and then we'll make...
Probably some groups of friends that are very connected within each other.
Okay.
They are not very much connected with each other. They're just groups, and then some random contacts which are not connected.
Okay. So what Barbara is saying is that, for example, this group of people is a group of people that is very connected. There is another group here that is similarly connected as well, so that everyone is connected with everyone else. But very often these two groups are not really connected to each other. You might have, of course, individuals here and there that are, for example, connected in pairs. You might have all sorts of different structure. Any other idea on how do they look like? And then we'll see a picture on this.
I'm trying to think of it as stars. They're all individual, and you try to draw constellation. It doesn't matter how they are connected, because connection is just a link between two people. So
Yes.
cluster as in all people from a certain geographic region won't be on one server only. I don't think they'll be clustered. They'll just be individual profiles.
Okay. We are talking about a specific site, okay? So we are not looking at all the possible social networking sites. So my idea is, how does the Facebook or the Orkut social networking site look like in terms of connection? Okay? I agree with you that what matters is also what goes on within this connection, the content sharing. Yesterday we were discussing this, but still it's important to understand if Facebook is actually made like this, for example, so that there is not really a strong connection across individuals, but that just one individual connected to another one who's connected with another one, or if we have what Barbara was suggesting, so groups, cliques, if you want, of individuals that are strongly connected, maybe because they're all friends with each other, okay, but which are disconnected by another group of people. Why this is interesting? Again, because we were thinking about the benefits of network effects. Okay? What we are interested in is to have global network effect, at least from a marketing and from a business point of view. Okay? If we have local network effects, we have benefits on the cost side, but the benefits are not as big as those from global network effects. Now, in general, both online and offline networks are characterized by three main properties. The first is the so-called low average distance, okay? Which means that, for example, if I take a person who's one of my friends, okay, and I want to understand how distant this person is from a friend of Paula, for example, the average distance, so the average number of paths that it takes to go from this friend of mine to Paula's friend is very low. Okay? There has been lots of research on this, and I think the most interesting one refers to the network of Hollywood actors. Okay? You might know this, but it's named Kevin Bacon Oracle. So the idea is that, Barbara is looking at me saying, what is this? Now I explain to you. You take all the actors in Hollywood. They did it for Hollywood, so this is important, not for all the actors in the world. You take the actors that made at least one film in Hollywood, okay, and you build up a network by considering which actors have acted with someone else in the same film, okay? So the unit of analysis is a movie, let's say. Here it is, the Oracle of Bacon. The idea is that any actor that you could think of that was actually in any Hollywood movie, okay, is less than 6 degrees away from Kevin Bacon. I'm talking about any actor, which means that, for example, give me a name. Give me a name of an actor that you think is not connected at all with Kevin Bacon. Ah, that's very close, I think. Okay, 2 average distance. Be a little bit more. I think he's also very close. Okay, this is an Italian actor, fairly famous, not very famous just for foreign people. 3. Okay? Because Giorgio Pasotti was in this movie. You should think with an actor who did The Replacement Killers with Carlos Leon, who did The Woodsman with Kevin Bacon. Okay? Juliette Binoche, I think, is very close. Two. Okay? So you could go on, I mean, you could put even Alvaro Vitali in that, okay, and he's close. 2. Just to give you an idea, okay? So people that you wouldn't think were linked together, okay, this is, of course, the unit is the film, but we could think as a unit, as a friendship, okay, are very close to each other. So, low average distance, this is true for almost any network you might think of. Second important property, very high clustering. This is something related to what Barbara was thinking before. The idea is that friends of friends are likely to be friends with each other. Okay, of course, this isn't true for all friends, but the idea is that the clustering is very high, so that the number of connections that is existing within a specific, you could think of a triangle of friends, for example, okay, is very high. So all the possible connections are actually in place. Low average distance, high clustering, and the third property, which is also very important, is that all the networks, and in particular social networking sites, are characterized by the so-called asymmetric distribution of links, okay, which follow a power law distribution. Do you know what this means? An asymmetric distribution of links means that there are a small number of people who have a very high number of friends. Let's think of a social networking site for now, and a very high number of people who have a very small number of friends. Okay, yesterday we were discussing about the importance of friendship performance. Okay, this has to do also with that particular issue. So remember that if you take almost any network, in particular any social network, these three are three very important characteristics. Okay, in general, social network sites support or mirror pre-existing social relations. So we've seen that very often what happens is that friends that are already friends offline become friends online. Okay? And this is really one of the major differences between these social networking sites as we know them now and very early forms of public computer-mediated communication means that had actually the aim of enlarging the network of friendships or the network at least of acquaintances. Okay? Right now what happens is that most of the time people talk with the friends with whom they talk also in real life. Since I like data and numbers, okay, these are the features that people use most when they are on social networking sites. This is a survey at the European level. Talk to friends, family, I talk to a lot. Talk to friends, family, I rarely see. Fair enough. 16, of course, multiple responses available. 69, 65%. So this is what actually users of social networking sites are very interested in. Talk to people who are friends of friends. Listen to music, find about bands, for example, the MySpace thing. Talk to people don't know, only 17%. Okay? So still the idea is that I use this particular tool in order to strengthen relationships that are already going on offline. Okay? While the initial idea of social networking was a different issue. Still on network structure. When we have a network like a social networking website that has low average distance and high clustering, we're talking about a small world. Okay, so the idea of that particular social networking sites came precisely from this. Okay, and that's why, for example, a small world allows users to get in only if they are invited by users who have a lot of connections. So the idea is that I want to create a very high clustering, so I want to have those kind of users, and if someone else is brought into that network, I want that friend to be very close in terms of network path to the people that are already existing. This is why the network is called a small world. Okay? These are structural properties of the network. They exploited this in order to create a selected network in which lots of people know each other. Okay? Why this is useful? I mean, we've discussed a lot the fact that network effects are important, that whenever network effects are in place, this means that there are benefits that increase with the number of users. So why I would like to have this type of network with very high clustering and low average distance? The sociological, if you want, interpretation of this particular type of networks is that high clustering, so this structure, creates social capital, if you want, content sharing, knowledge, whatever, within specific cliques. Okay, so within specific group of users. And the idea is that if I have a small world, everyone can talk with everyone else, and the content that is shared increases. Okay? If the network is very loose, if I have, well, this is an extreme example, but if I have this type of network, the information and the content that is shared within the network is not as strong as in the structure such as the small world. Okay? So the high clustering creates really social capital within different cliques. Another important property is when we describe how social networks look like, actually, is that these networks are scale-free, okay? And this is driven mostly by the asymmetric distribution of links. So the idea is that the way in which the network evolves is related to the fact that if I have lots of friends, and you, Carmen, for example, has to decide who to connect with in a network, chances are pretty good that she's connecting with me because I have access to lots of people. Okay? This mechanism drives the evolution of the network, so the dynamics of the network, how the network grows, really depends on the action of these central nodes. And of course, these central nodes are very important also for companies. So those are the users that I have to really pay attention to. If I want, for example, to advertise products, if I want to, I don't know, market some services to a group of users, if we want to understand the behavior of the clicks. Okay? The mechanism by which Carmen has interest in connecting with me, because I know a lot of people on the network, is called the preferential attachment. Okay? So the idea is that it is not true that the network effect works at the same way with all users. Okay? But users who have more connection are also those that are more likely to have more connection in the future. So there is a preferential attachment by which I tend to go where actually the biggest cluster is. Okay? And so the preferential attachment is really what drives the network formation. Now, this is small, but I hope you can see this. Okay? This is the replication of an online social network. Okay? There is a very interesting website if you're interested in the structure of the social networking, which is called orgnet.com. And this is built really by looking at different profiles on a website. There is the same thing for Twitter as well. And by looking of who those people are connected to. Okay? So what you see is something slightly different from what Barbara was mentioning, although she had kind of the right picture in mind. You have a core of very connected people. Okay? Then you have a ring of people who are connected to each other, but are not connected to the core, but still we have some clicks here and there. And then, probably surprisingly, you have a very high number of people who are not really connected. So they are registered on some websites, but they're not really connected to other people in the network. Okay? This structure is particularly important if you think about that in terms of what kind of benefits I can take from exploiting this particular structure. Okay? So, this is true for most online communities. And in most online communities, we have basically three social rings. The red ones that we've seen before in the picture, people who are densely connected, big cliques, if you want, where the distance is very low, where the clustering coefficient is very high. So the probability that friends of mine are also friends of another person in that particular clique are extremely high. Then you have a group of people who are loosely connected, okay, the green dots that we've seen before, people who might be like this, for example, so people who do not really place a great importance to the network, but nonetheless they have some connection. And then we have an outer ring of completely disconnected nodes. Now, if all the network was disconnected, the costs of managing the network would be very, very high. So the interest not only of the companies who want, for example, to exploit social networking for business, but also of the companies that build social networking is create as many cliques, as many clustering as possible in order to exploit the benefit. Interesting points, if you take the average of the online social networking sites, disconnected nodes by far outnumber the highly connected ones. Okay, so very often you have more than 60% of the nodes within the network, so of the people who have registered, for example, to a specific social networking site, who are not connected with anyone else. You register because you like to be in a social networking site, okay, but you're not exploiting really the value of that particular site. So you might accept an invitation from the company who's advertising its network. Hello. But the idea is that you're not really placing a very high value to that. So people with very few connections are usually those that have prior acquaintances within the network, so are not really connected with the larger community. They do not have any sense of belonging to the network. These are not very interesting users. We are now talking from a business perspective, okay? You do not have any value in addressing users that are not connected to the biggest communities. People who are like the green dots on the graph we've seen before, these are more interesting in the sense that usually these are a small cluster of friends, okay? And the idea is that probably they do not place too much emphasis on the belonging to a social network, but still you could address these people by providing services and products that are targeted to that particular users. But the people that you should look for is those very central nodes that are usually less than 20% within a network. So the big component, in a way, is not really large as compared to the size of the network, but these are extremely well connected. Okay? So if we think in terms of a company who wants to invest in the social networking sites because it has the availability of a large number of users, these are the users who are the most interesting one. Okay? Now, whatever we said so far implies that whenever you have a network such as the one that we've seen depicted before, having very strong ties, having very highly clustered people is a positive thing, okay? Because in the end, what you're looking for is for people who are very well connected. You can get lots of benefits if you're attaching to a person who's well connected, which means who has a lot of friends or a lot of acquaintances at least, and so on. However, if we think of social network, yes? No, it's not. Yeah. You're talking about users or about companies who want, about the users? Okay, so I want to promote a service and, well, for example, you have lower advertising costs if you're advertising a product or a service, for example, to this person here, okay? Because he or she can spread the news involuntarily also to other people in the network, okay? If I have a network which is composed by nodes that are not connected to each other, this means that I have to address individually each single person, okay? From a user perspective, the idea is that if I want to get in touch with lots of people in the network, I prefer to get in touch with this person than with this person or with this person here, okay? So even if we do not think about disconnected networks, if we think about people who have very loose networks, okay, those people are not extremely valuable, both from a business perspective and also to enforce network effect. What is the benefit for me to being connected to a person, besides the fact that he's or she's my friend, who's completely outside the network? Think about that in terms of content sharing, and think about that in terms of possible value that companies can gain from those networks, okay? Now I turn the question to you, and I say, well, so far I'm trying to convince that looking at these particular people is interesting, both from the consumer and from the business perspective. However, there is a very well-known theory, okay, perspective, managerial perspective, that says that actually it is not these people who are most valuable for a company or for a network, okay? In other words, strong ties, which are represented by very clustered network, are as important or even less important than the so-called weak ties. You have any idea of why is that? A weak tie, for example, would be a person who's connected, I don't know, this person is connected with this person or is connected with another person here. Yes, in this respect, yes. It has to do also with the fact that you're connected, for example, to people that are outside of a specific clique, Okay? Yeah.
Weak ties are actually the connections that connect these clusters.
Okay.
So they are the connectors.
Okay. Okay. So the idea is that if you have a group of friends, imagine this situation. Okay? The information that is shared or the content that is shared very often is redundant. Okay? After all, people who are strongly connected, okay, very often belong to the same socio-demographic group. If you look, for example, at studies that have been performed in the US colleges, belong to the same ethnic groups, belong to the same income groups, and so on and so forth. Okay? But the real value of these particular networks is actually to enlarge, in terms of heterogeneity, the user base, the user that you want to know, the users that you want to get in touch with. And this is particularly true if we think of business networks. Okay? Because if we think not in terms of Facebook, but for example in terms of LinkedIn, okay, I might be much more interested in people that I don't know that well, but that can connect me, as he was saying, with other parts of the network that I don't know. Okay? So if you're all at Bocconi University, chances are pretty good that you all get the same job offers information. Okay? You have the newsletter, you go to the office, and you get more or less the same information. If some of you is connected to a network which is outside of Bocconi University, information you get is probably very different. Okay? And that adds value in a way, because it's not redundant anymore. Okay? If the two of you talk to each other about the job opportunities that comes out of Bocconi, well, you might probably know the same thing. Okay? The information that you might want to share across each other is not really valuable once a piece of information is detected. And this is very interesting. There has been a study looking on how do individuals find a job. Okay? And the findings is that people with a very high number of weak ties, so these people, have a higher probability of finding a job as compared with people that have a few number of very strong ties. And the reason for this is that information and knowledge are very redundant within very tight networks. So if the networks are extremely well clustered, extremely tight, if a small word is in place, okay, the information, you agree, Carmen, on that? Yeah. The information that goes within the connection is extremely redundant. Okay, so we're talking about a structural property, also to answer Barbara's question before, what is a tie in this respect, what does weak mean? But we end up saying that actually weak ties can provide more valuable content and information than very strong ties, than networks that are extremely clustered.
Well, this theory is key on the consumer perspective, because for the company, where economies of scale and everything, it comes again from the strong ties.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of economies of, even in terms of economies of scale, I might be interested in having all the network connected. Okay, so the person here, what this is saying is that this person here is probably, because it has connection with these two people and also with the other clique, is probably more interesting than this person here who's strongly connected but just within a specific clique. But still, I mean, you're correct in saying that if I want to, again, advertise a product, okay, first I start here and then I look at what's outside. Okay? But this guy here, so within the same clique, also different people have different values for companies. Okay? From the individual perspective, if we think of the job, of course, search, this is particularly strong, but even if we think of any kind of content sharing, okay, this is true. So friends tend to share exactly the same piece of information. We all see it if we look at Facebook or at other kind of social networking. There is a convention in the next room. This is where people are coming. So those who know each other very well, remember this, because this is useful also for your future tend to know about the same jobs, for example. And it is really brief contacts that very often matter, that very often helps, because they really can provide valuable information which is not redundant, which has not appeared elsewhere in the network. The consequence of this is that really the value of social networking is not just in strengthening existing relationships. So users tend to talk to people online that they often see offline. The networks are somehow replicated offline and online, but actually social networking sites have much more value than what is currently exploited by existing users. Okay? Now, of course, an actor position within a network, so if we look at a single individual, for example, within a network, which brings about knowledge and information, his social capital determines its opportunities and constraints in playing a role in a network, whether we think of a business network or a consumer's network, okay? In the same website where you can find the picture of the social network inside, there is a very interesting picture of the so-called ICT industry or internet industry, and there are three very central nodes, okay, that are American Online, IBM, and Microsoft. If you look at the number of connections in terms of business relations, okay, those companies stand out as the most central ever. And in that respect, they really can provide opportunities, okay, for the network to enlarge and improve. Profile fields that reduce transaction costs and are very, very hard to falsify are really most likely to be associated with larger number of friendships, okay? So to be very central nodes. Again, friendship links does not mean that you're really friends, okay? So I'm talking about friendship, about connections, but the idea is that I'm a friend in the social networking side term. So I might just be connected with someone, okay? A different issue is really what goes on within that connection. So the content that is shared is very often more important than the type of connection that is set up. But still, those profiles are particularly relevant if we look for central nodes. And in this respect, we can really distinguish between different kinds of users, okay? From a theory point of view, there have been different classification, different thoughts about how can you describe the users that belong to a social networking site. There are clearly passive members, would be the disconnected one, inviters, okay, so people who tend to put lots of value in having lots of connection and so invite other friends, and linkers, the ones that he was mentioning, these particular people. Okay? So people who are active in the sense that they link different clicks within the network. Okay? From a company perspective, it is very interesting to understand how profitable are different type of users. Okay? So what do you expect in terms of user characteristics? How would you segment, for example, the market of social networking sites? Imagine that you had to advertise a product. Okay? What would you do? What kind of characteristics you would look at in order to understand how to provide a service or a product to different people in a network? How do you think people group within social networking sites? How do you think these cliques are formed? How would you go about segmenting a social networking site community? Really, imagine that you're a company and you want to advertise or you want to sell a product. Okay, yeah. Age.
Geography.
Okay.
Interest.
Common experiences, like something the same scope, something that
Okay, let's say education. What? although that's a very difficult information to have. More valuable than this is the professional status, or information about the profession. You were also saying geography. Okay, so for example, one of the way in which different sites allow you to find people around is to look at geographical networks. Okay, so one of the information that is very often used also by company in order to try to understand where to market the product is where do users come from, okay, or what is the city and so on. There has been a very big survey, and that was carried out mostly in the UK, and I think this is very interesting in order to understand how you can really try to investigate the social networking sites all over specific countries. Okay. The survey found that there are basically 5 types of social networking users, and then we will also discuss about the non-users. Okay, because so far no one has really mentioned the issue of why is it so valuable to get connected to a social networking site. Maybe I can also do without that. Okay? There are the so-called alpha socializers. Okay? So people who use the websites in a very intense way, very short bursts to flirt, meet new people, being entertained and so on. Then there are attention seekers, so people who really look for attention and comments from others, who are trying to provide feedbacks. They post photos, they customize their profile. There are people who are changing their Facebook status every 5 minutes. Okay? Who cares? Well, probably they want to attract the comments of the other friends, the comments of the users, and so on. People who want to share content, who want to share pictures, videos, whatever else. Then there are the so-called followers. Okay? These are the people who are not really first mover in terms of joining the networks. They basically join because they want to keep up, let's say, with what their friends and acquaintances are doing, but they're not extremely interested in the features of the social networking sites. Okay? Always think about this in terms of the value that different categories of users can provide both to consumers and to companies. Then there are the so-called faithfuls. This is a category which is particularly popular around. These are the people who use the social networking sites to search for very old friends from school. I think everyone has done that, or from university, according to the age. And then there are the people who are using the social networking sites in a very functional way. So I need something, I need some information, I need to find a job, I need, I don't know, to be connected with a person who can provide me specific information. I just use the social networking site for that particular reason. Now, here we have all the users, okay, so the ones that I've mentioned you before, alpha socializer, attention seekers, those are the intensive users. Also the functionals are somehow intensive, but for different reasons. And then followers and faithfuls who are not particularly intensive users of social networking sites, but still are enrolled in that site. What are your guesses in terms of the age, average age of this individual, the gender, the typical sites that these individuals are connected to in terms of social networking, and the numbers? What do you think is the age, for example, of alpha socializers as compared to functional, or the age of faithfuls as compared to functionals? Try to guess. Okay, so you think that somehow the age is following the intensity of use. So in a way, alpha socializer, attention seekers probably are younger than functional faithfuls or probably followers who tend to join very late. What about gender? Who are the alpha socializer? Male, female? Who do you think are the alpha socializers? Male. Alpha socializers are those who are intensively using the network to meet new people and so on. Half and half, you say, democratically. Okay. And what about the typical websites? If you think about the most common social networking sites, for example, think about Facebook, think about MySpace, think about the example that we've seen also yesterday.
Twitter and Facebook are probably more for attention seekers and alpha socializers, but the Facebook is definitely the national, like the school reunion sites.
Okay.
For functional, probably more than
Okay. Now, okay, this is the style of use that we've discussed. Alpha socializers are actually mostly male, but very interesting. Attention seekers are mostly female. Okay, so you can think about your network of friends and try to think about the person who posts more pictures, for example, or the person who updates their status. The followers are a big heterogeneous group of people. The functionals tend to be mostly male. Of course, this is also related to the fact that if you look at the job description and job opportunities, this is much more concentrated in the male environment. Age, well, alpha socializer under 25 years, so they're actually younger. Faithful and functional tend to be older, okay, than the others. The followers, again, is not a particularly interesting group of people. This is an interesting finding. So the attention seekers, this was UK. Okay, so the UK has a very peculiar social structure as well. Attention seekers go from teenagers to people that are older, especially mothers that stay at home and chat or post different contents. These are the websites that are mostly used. Now, the interesting thing to notice is the heterogeneity of the website. So, for example, the faithfuls, okay, who are the people who use social networking sites in order to look for old friends from school or university, tend to be very concentrated in the way in which they use the website, while the other people tend to actually use very different type of websites. And in terms of number of people, of course, this is the typical, if you want, finding that you might think of whenever you have such a market segmentation. You have a minority of very, very intensive users. You have some attention seekers, many followers, and faithful, so people who just follow the trend in a way, and then a minority of functionals, because these are really focused people. So these are people who actually use a social networking site because I have an interest in, yeah.
Maybe there is a characteristic which is not taken into account in this chart. It's the timeline when you start using a network, you maybe tend to be more attention seeker or socializer.
Very good point. Very good point. Of course, this was a survey that was carried out in 2008, so a snapshot, a picture of that. Your point is particularly interesting because, of course, people move around. Well, their age, first of all, is moving, and also the attitude towards specific social networking site, the way in which they access different social networking sites. When you're young, you might tend to look for Facebook. When you grow, for example, you might want to go to LinkedIn or to more functional social networking site. What I'm doing on the social networking sites depends also very much on the technical skills that I have and that are not depicted here. Okay? Now, this tells you something about the user's awareness of social networking sites. Okay? So these are parents, these are all children, and this is a split of the younger people, okay, in terms of awareness, which means they ask people, do you know what a social networking site is? This means that 64% of teenagers between 16 and 17 years old spontaneously said, yeah, I know what it is, and they provided an example. Another 30% said, yeah, I know what it is once they were given a description, and then a small percentage when they were actually told, okay, Facebook, do you know what Facebook is? And of course the percentage, well, is bigger for a very small kid, but is also bigger for parents. This is the distribution of users' age for specific sites. The first one is all member communities, okay? So 25% of people between 35 and 49 years old use the social networking sites, which is not really a small percentage. Then, of course, before that you have 18%, 25, 34, 70%, and then 11 and 5, of course. But really, if you imagine to plot the numbers, okay, in a curve, you get really sort of, not really a normal distribution, but a quasi-normal distribution of users across the age. And then these are the percentages of usage of these three particular websites, so MySpace, Bebo, and Facebook. And as you see, Facebook is really catching the attention of young people as compared, for example, to other websites. Now, we've talked a lot about the users. Let's talk a little bit about the non-users. So, how many of your friends you think are not using the social networking sites? Are not connected, let's say, then the use is a different thing. Give me a percentage. To any social networking site. You would say 10%. Okay. You would say 50%. If we consider users, I mean, you are also older people and everything. So, Antonio. People that you know, like, well, your offline network, let's put it like this. You would say 0. No. 70% okay, so you would say it's a high percentage. See, I mean, this is just to know that it is a relevant percentage of people we're talking about. And I would like to ask you, why do you think people are not actually connected to any social networking sites? So if there is a value, we've talked a lot about content sharing, information sharing. Yesterday we saw that Facebook has actually overcome email in the content sharing, in terms of content sharing. So why shouldn't I use a social networking site? What might be the reason for this? Okay. First big reason, privacy. Other reasons? Inertia. Sorry? Inertia. In which sense? I'm just... They don't want to register for their job or create a profile. Okay, people are lazy. They just do not want to bother getting into a website because they think it's not really valuable. Yeah.
They are only on this site when you reunion with your school friends.
Okay.
And many of them who are not registering on the website to this network, they're afraid that the other people will see how they look, they look that nice, that maybe they don't have.
Okay. Correct, which somehow has to do with a sort of privacy issue. Again, when you started talking, I thought you were going to a different direction. But yes, I mean, this has to do with people just putting together this two, you know, I'm interested in a small group of people and I do not want other people to see my profile or the information about my life. Okay, there is of course a problem of technical skills. This is something that you probably do not think of because you're all very skilled in the use of these particular tools, but there is a whole bunch of population that doesn't know how to use this. Olivier, you want to? Okay. Yeah. Others? Ideas? Okay. So, First big group, the privacy concerned people. Okay, so I'm not using a social networking site mostly because I'm concerned about my privacy. So in particular about making my personal details available online. Second big group of people, there are the technically unskilled or inexperienced people. Okay, we could add to this group people who do not have, for example, the availability of a connection. Well, of course, we're talking about particular cases, but still technical skills matter in the way in which you use this particular website. And then there are the so-called intellectual rejectors, which have to do a little bit with the inertia idea, but it's a little bit more than this. People who just have no interest in social networking sites, who see them as a waste of time. There are a lot of people who log out of social networking sites just saying, I mean, I waste my time and I do not want to, you know, spend time providing people with different type of information about my life all day long. So, users, non-users, and now we close the discussion about social networking sites, talking about and summarizing the benefits for businesses. Now, in order to do so, how companies can benefit from the diffusion of social networking, I want to show you, talking about social networking, a small video.
All right, on one side you have your business, looking for ways to power technology to reach new customers and improve productivity. On the other, you have hundreds of millions of people using social networks like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, your employees and partners included. But how do you decide which services to use and for which purposes? The exciting thing is that many concepts like social networking, microblogging, and wiki-style collaboration have been adapted for the corporate environment. That means that instead of being worried about having a million friends, you can focus on using the data most. Let's say you want to improve communication between your partners and employees. You can set up your own version of Twitter using a service like Yammer, where the answer to the question of what are you doing relates to work, not what we had for breakfast. What about sharing documents? Instead of sending emails back and forth, you can use a service like Socializers to organize files and work on them collaboratively with the wiki. What about these millions of people over here? And you communicate with them effectively too. The key is to work smarter, not harder. Just like you have CRM tools for your company, there are now ways to make managing your business relationships on social networks a sound. Coaching, for example, lets you manage Twitter with multiple accounts, so your employees can respond to questions, follow up on tasks, and monitor your brand. Involve write applications to your company's Facebook page to make the hard work and constantly adding new content and activities. By picking the right tools, your employees, your partners, and your customers can get on the same page, all without making any economics. Now, you're seizing an opportunity in the social network. Let's tear down this wall.
Okay. Just to give you a very brief illustration of what actually can social networking do for business. What is the benefits then of social networking for businesses, for companies? So imagine you're running a company. Yes?
Maybe it's an example of this is
Yeah?
intellectual rejectors and then how it relates to businesses
Yeah.
and benefits. Well, let me take Copenhagen Business School as an example.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of similar business. This business organization. And before, until we've had for the last 20 years president of that business school, and he was very engaged with people, but he never really adopted this this electronic platform. So he never responded to emails and stuff like that, because he would prefer to take the phone or to take the contract directly. Whereas the new president of CBS, who went into position this spring,
Yeah.
he's like very engaged in the social platform. So he has now started new projects where students engage with staff and where different kinds of platforms where staff members communicate
Okay.
internally and also externally. So it gives the organization, how you university a lot of benefits because it helps us develop dispute organizations. So it helps us speeding the development.
Yeah, okay, good example, because this is somehow related to an existing business. Okay, well, it's not really a business, somehow a business, an organization or a company that exists and that can exploit social networking in order to build up credibility and trust, in a way, on the side of the users. Okay, so seeing actually a company, an organization on a social networking site with a real account and people who are actually posting information, contents, who are using a social networking really help that particular company acquire credibility and acquire also a trust on the side of the users who can interact, okay, with that particular company. This is also a very peculiar case because the business is there. Okay, so Copenhagen Business School doesn't really need, okay, to find way to exploit social networking sites because, for example, it's new to the market. Okay, what about new companies? What is the benefit, the biggest benefit of social networking sites for new startups, for example, for businesses that are new to the market? Would you use social networking sites if you had to start up a company and, I don't know, make business? Yeah. Okay, well, there is an issue of visibility, first of all, so I want to be acknowledged by people around the world. What else?
If you don't know a company, then the fact that somebody, your friend uses it, builds it instantly its credibility, even if you don't know the brand.
Okay, so again, that's... Okay, so that's for a company which is not maybe new to the market, but it might be new to you, to the specific users. Yes?
Maybe also a cheaper way of promoting and also more focused and more targeted.
Okay, so let's say cheaper and more targeted marketing strategies, then this includes promoting the companies, promoting the products, and so on. And then there is another function which is very important. Yeah. Sorry.
I guess you can also mention the term crowdsourcing, which is building basically first we had like this in-house innovation where companies did everything themselves, and then they outsourced these specific functions, and then crowdsourcing is like the new phenomenon. Right? It is helping to develop new products, services, etc. with less costs.
Okay, so you can find business partners in this way. Okay, you can find employees in this way. Think of LinkedIn. So there are a whole number of different benefits that are embedded in the concept of social networking sites for business. So the first, building credibility and trust. Low cost, sometimes free, not always sometimes, but advertising, okay, which has to do with the idea of cheaper and more targeted also type of marketing strategies for companies. You can really boost your company by creating an online presence. So in the way in which Barbara was mentioning, I can also make myself more visible, even if I'm already in the market, but people just, or not all of the people know me because I'm, for example, a very specific company. Creating profiles on most important social networking sites, and then, of course, posting information, sharing content, really increases the interest of other members. And in particular, the idea is that I have to understand, as Antonio was saying, who are really the target, okay? I can really implement a marketing strategies which is really targeted to a specific group of users, and I do not really need to go to a market research company in order to understand the market segmentation. And this is a big cost-saving structure, okay? I can just simply exploit the information that I get from a website or from a social networking site, see what kind of products or what kind of information or content people share with each other, and then try to leverage upon that specific activity. Of course, well, this is a very simple, if you want, benefit that people can have, that companies can have. This is also a means of staying in contact with the users in the way in which Casper was describing with the Copenhagen Business School example. I can send out instant messages. This is also what the video was saying. Promotion, targeted promotion or sales, building up events or conventions. Okay? So social networking sites are also very important tools for the inside of the company, not only for promoting the company outside. So remember also the aspect of increasing, if you want, the productivity, increasing the trust of people who work for a company by building up a specific social networking site. And finally, find employees and business partners, okay? Crowdsourcing, but more generally try to understand who's working in my environment, who's working in my industry, how can I try to find business partners that can help me, for example, in specific functions in my businesses, okay? And they easily can send out messages to notify people that they're hiring, for example. I can post job positions online, I can accept application, and so on and so forth. Time is running, but we can say it maybe next time before discussing the VoIP case. The most important case in this particular respect is LinkedIn. So I stop here. Next week, I'll tell you something about the specific LinkedIn case, and then we will discuss the old voice over IP applications as innovative application in the fixed telecom environment. Thank you.